Hello and welcome my art-loving friends. In the last video, we pulled out the Sennelier Petite Aquarelle paints. Those are the student grade version of Sennelier paints. And we played with them a little bit, swatched them, played with the little box. Didn't finish up everything we needed to in that video. So in today's video, we're going to compare the student grade Sennelier Petite Aquarelle paints to the professional grade Sennelier paints and finish up a couple things that we needed to finish in last video. If this is the first video you're catching on my channel, then pause this one and go watch the one that I will link for you in the corner that is the prelude to this one, and then you can come back and finish this one. All right, let's get out the Sennelier professional grade paints, figure out what we need to do with them, do a couple of comparison paintings, some side-by-side swatching if we need to, and finish up that cute little wood palette that we started in the last video. To get this party started, I have pulled out all the Sennelier paint that I know I have today. This may change tomorrow, as we well know on the channel. This is the Aqua Mini that I received in an art subscription box. Many of you were very excited for me to play with this one right away, and I did a little off-screen. I think I actually have this recorded, but I did the swatches for my big watercolor project, which I'll explain later. So this is all the colors that come in the Aqua Mini set. Now these are professional grade Sennelier paints, even though that burnt umber looks a little weak. We're going to talk about that some more. So I have these 8 colors here, and then in this palette are all the professional grade Sennelier paints that I have accumulated over time. 12 of these I bought myself, and a few of them were added by receiving a few when I went to a watercolor retreat in Mexico, and the coordinator of that retreat gave us 3 or 4 colors, and several of them were, well, at least 2 of them were new to me, and I added them in this palette. These 16 pans here are the Sennelier student grade, the Petite Aquarelle ones, and we can compare the colors that are the same between these professional grade paints and those student grade paints, and do a painting with just professional grade and with student grade. And I will give you notes on my comparisons here because I think that many of you are going to be very interested to see the differences between the professional line and the student line. In the Sennelier Aqua Mini set, there are these 4 colors that are not in the colors I already have in the professional set here. And so I think I would like to incorporate them into my main palette because, let's admit it, this palette's not that useful. These are extruded half pans in this very, very flimsy plastic, plus the lid that you would use for mixing space has a clear inset, and I could spray this with my appliance epoxy like I've done in many previous videos and make this more useful. But if I travel with Sennelier paints, this size palette is not unheard of for me to take with me. Yes, it's larger than some traditional travel palettes, but since I took off that 3rd flap, it's still very doable for me in my travel bags. So when I took this cheap plastic out, I pried it out with this palette knife, and these are not affixed in there, or at least not here in Colorado where it's very dry. So they all came popping out when I popped out this plastic piece. So be aware of that and make sure you know where your colors go if you want to pop that out. Otherwise, you're just going to have them everywhere and, you know, good luck. Luckily, with only 8 colors, it is very obvious what colors are which, so it's not a big deal. And the colors in the student set that are the same as the ones that I have in my professional line would be these here. And then because I pulled the Payne's Gray out of that and the burnt umber out of that, we have these additional ones here. So we have 8 colors that are exactly the same pigment, 1 from the student line, 1 from the professional line, and we can do direct comparisons of those. Now I did just create light fast tests for these today and have to put them in the window, so it will be months before we know how the light fastness holds up. But I will give you updates on all of that information in the future, so if you're new, consider subscribing. It's absolutely free, just notifies you when I release a video, and you can choose to watch it or not. Hopefully you do choose to watch it. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the comparisons. For the direct comparison, I love using the paper that's in my Etcher sketchbooks. These are not the perfect sketchbooks. This is just the everyday sketchbook. So it is 105-pound paper, if I'm remembering correctly, and it is a joy to work on. You can see I have some paintings in here that, in my opinion, turned out quite nicely. It's a good feel. And my big A3 size is full. So I'm thinking with only 8 paints here, I can fit this on this A5 size. And I think I said A3 a minute ago, and I meant A4. The other sketchbook I have that is full is an A4. We are all set up and ready to go. And because I want this to be as authentic for you guys as possible, what I will do, I'm not going to clip that actually. I'm going to leave this real time. So it might make this video a little bit longer, but I want you to see the differences between the paints without any editing. So yeah, here we go. This is the lemon yellow. It's a PY3. This one that I'm starting with is the Petite Aquarelle, the student grade. So you can see how it re-wets or not. Re-wet fine actually. And we can swatch it there. I'm trying to be careful not to go over this tape too much because it's very thin tape. So I want to be able to use this spot right next to it right away. Probably should have left that more of a gradient, but that's okay. So that one re-wet perfectly fine. Gonna get some more water here. And this is the professional grade lemon yellow PY3. Too much water. I'll try and even these out, make them look the same. Man, I have a glare. It's the catch-22. We have a very stormy day, very snow-filled day in the middle/end of April. What the heck? So I have to have studio lights on. Didn't even try to get more pigment on the professional grade one, and it is deeper, darker, and richer than the student grade one. You may not be able to see that quite yet on the camera, which is sad, but hopefully I can get some footage for you when they dry that will make sense there. Let's do the next yellow. This one is called Primary Yellow in the student line. It's a PY74, and it's also called Primary Yellow in the professional line. So re-wetting of the student line is just fine. Now I was under the understanding, based on Sennelier's own website, that even their student line has honey in them because their professional line is honey based. The difference is that their student line had glycerin added to it, so more binder basically. But a comment on my last video from Mina Does Art Stuff, she doesn't think there's honey in the student line at all, that it's just a different binder. So I am not sure. Even Kim Crick's site says these are honey based, so I don't know what to think. What do you guys think? Have you seen other sites that say definitively whether the student line has honey in it still or not? See, I can see a big difference just there already in the pigment load, which I wasn't sure I would be able to see such a big difference right away, but I do. It doesn't feel different so far, at least not in these colors. We'll see when we get to the suspicious browns, but in looks, the professional one definitely is deeper, darker, richer. Next up we have the green yellow is what it's called in the student line, and it's called Phthalo Green Light in the professional line. So let's start with the student one. Again, re-wets perfectly fine. Gets a nice bit of pigment going on the top of the pan. Lays down nicely, just like it lays down not as much color as you think it should with that much pigment load on the brush. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm gonna go grab some more. Now this is when it gets sticky, when you don't have a whole lot of moisture in your brush anymore. It's sticky. And kind of pulls across the paper. Not too badly. I was gonna say a little bit like if you're trying to play with pudding or something. There we go. Hey, I'm really excited about this one. So the exact same pigment information, just different names. Phthalo Green Light here for the professional. Let's see what we get. So slightly more pigment lay down at the first bit. Kind of seems like the yellow is coming through a little bit more on the professional brand. And I went over that one twice, so I'm going to go over the professional one twice. It just seems fair, right? Okay, hopefully you can see in the camera that one is actually quite a bit different in pigment load. Now again, if these so far were all you had and all you knew, you probably wouldn't even notice. But when you're comparing them side by side, I notice. However, I've already thought to myself, for the colors that I don't have in my professional palette that will fill in the blanks from the student line, that I would go ahead and put them in my palette. Because there are 13 colors in the student line set that I don't have in the professional line set. Like the orange would be a nice one to have. Anyway, let's continue. Primary blue. This one is a PB153, so it's considered a phthalo blue, obviously, in the professional line, but primary blue here in the student line re-wets really easily, and in the last video, this one did not take several coats. This is a nice, strong phthalo. Get some water and dilute it a bit. I will go ahead and do a second coat over this one, just try and get nice and even swatch going. This one is not feeling too sticky when I take the brush back over it, but I do still have quite a bit of moisture in the brush. So I'm really curious about this one in the professional line, so let's pull this out. Toss it around a bit. Get some water. Okay. Re-wet's perfectly fine. Oh, wow. Can you guys see that difference? Whoa. And I even thought, oh, I probably need a little bit more in the brush because that wasn't very much. Wow, okay. And here I thought the student line had a pretty nice pigment load, very strong for this color, or this pigment I should say, and this professional one just blew that out of the water. Well, again, I think it's a case of if you didn't know, then this student line one would fill just fine. Now my paper is a little bit warped there, so that it's kind of accumulating in the crease of the sketchbook. We'll just let it and move on. Now we have the student line ultramarine. This is the PB29, so same pigment, both student and professional grade. Re-wets beautifully in the student line. Let's see what it looks like. Very nice. You can tell already that it's granulating. That's one thing I noticed in the last video, is it's very obvious that it's granulating. Sennelier does make a French ultramarine that I actually have in my professional palette. That was way too much water. That's not going to be a fair comparison if I don't take some of that water out there. Anyway, with a lot of water we can get a nice bit of granulation. But anyway, they make a French ultramarine that is less granulating that I do have in the other palette. It's not quite a great gradient, but still a good representation of the color. Okay, here's the professional ultramarine deep is what they call it, but it's still just a PB29. Re-wets beautifully. I'm so curious how this will go down. Let's see. Beautifully. So not a huge difference at first, although the hue seems a little bit different. The hue on this one is a little bit brighter. Let's get another coat over that and see. That's too much water again, just like I did with the other one. Yeah, so PB29s, but this professional grade one is a brighter blue. Next up, we have the ones I'm really curious about because these were a little bit annoying in the last video. The burnt sienna here. Let's re-wet that and see what we come up with. So it appears to re-wet really easily, but it's deceiving because not very much pigment goes down on the paper. At least that was my experience last time. So let's see how this does. Okay, did a little better this time. I don't know if different brush, less water, more pigment, I don't know, but still it's kind of weak. Do you agree? So let's get some more water, some more pigment going and see if we can't get a second coat on that and see what it looks like. I think we'll keep it at this second coat here. I just dabbed a little off so I could come down in my gradient. And let's do the professional one. Here we go. I'm so curious. So it seems to re-wet the same. No big differences there. Let's see how it goes down. Whoa, way more, even though I was told on my comments that even the professional grade is pretty weak. But that was a pretty big difference. Okay, let's do the second coat. Wow, big difference. I'm trying to get the same water and paint ratio here. This one does look way more watery though, so maybe I did a bad job there. I don't know if I should try and do it again. I'll pull some of that water up and then recoat it, but I don't know. At least you guys got to see that in real time, and yeah, see, it's gooey. Ugh. Yeah, gooey, sticky, weird. Okay, so it's fine. Just gotta leave it. So for this next one is the burnt umber. I was really underwhelmed with this one in the last video. Plus it dried looking chalky. It didn't feel chalky, it just looked chalky. All right, let's see how this does. Riley came home and I'm like, you can't giggle. He's like, I'll be absolutely quiet. No giggling. He's in there giggling. He watches videos that he gets a kick out of and he giggles and it's so cute, but he's giggling, not being quiet. Burnt umber, here we go. Yeah, that's underwhelming. Let's try and grab a second coat. See, it's sticky. You have to have a lot of water in your brush, but then you have a lot of water and you don't get a lot of pigment. So it's really frustrating. Okay, got what I could, as best as I could, as best as I felt I could. Okay, so that's better, but man, I wouldn't want to use this brown. That would be really frustrating. So because this professional one is from the Aqua Mini palette, I haven't used this yet because I don't actually have burnt umber in my main palette. So this is a new to me Sennelier color. And I'm saying it the American way, Sennelier, even though it's like, what is it, Sennelier? Not sure, but I'm American. We'll say it the American way. Okay, let's see here, get some more, do our traditional second coat here. Ooh, yeah, that's a big difference. Last but not least is our student grade Payne's Gray. Usually one of my absolute favorite colors. Let's see how we do today here. Ah, see, it's disappointing. Feels like you have all this paint and pigment in your brush and then you go and put it down. It's like, where did it all go? All right, let's try and get some more. It's way better, but not perfect. That was 2 coats. I'll try and stick to 2 coats here with the professional grade. Get the same kind of re-wetting going on as far as the water to pigment ratio here. And here we go. Whoa! Oh my gosh, that was a huge difference. Holy moly. I didn't expect the difference to be that dramatic. Wow, we wouldn't even need to do a second coat with the professional line, but you know, in all fairness, we got to do that second coat, don't you agree? Hopefully you agree. Oh, I love it. Now that's what a Payne's Gray should look like. Now when I did my indigo comparison, Sennelier was one of my top contenders along with Core, and Payne's Gray and indigo are similar to me. Obviously it depends on the brand, but that's, out of all of these colors, the Phthalo Blue and the Payne's Gray are the biggest ones that show a huge difference between each other, and then the ultramarine would be 3rd place. I'm gonna let these dry and then I'll show them to you up close. The moment of truth, they are all dry. And I'll show you a different angle here in a moment. What differences do you guys see? Some are obvious, some not so much. This one is stronger in the pigment than the student grade, same with this one. Very hard to see on camera. It's interesting because while the phthalo green lights are very similar, the hue is seems just slightly off. These are also very similar, except obviously much more pigmented. I love the differences in the ultramarine here because if you want a very granulating ultramarine, go for the student grade. This one is still granulating, but not nearly as much as the student grade. The burnt sienna just is slightly stronger in the professional grade than the student grade. Still a little weak in my opinion. Same with the burnt umber. Much stronger in professional grade, still a little weak. Payne's Gray though, I'm very happy with the professional grade Payne's Gray, but the student grade Payne's Gray would drive me crazy to try and use. Let me show you a different angle. Here's a different angle. Hopefully this lets you see some of the differences in slightly different fashion. And down here, here's the granulation I was talking about. All right. And because I mentioned the French ultramarine, I wanted to show that to you. Now, normally the French ultramarine is less granulating than the other ultramarines, but in this case it's different. It's kind of a middle ground between the student grade ultramarine and the professional grade ultramarine deep, which is kind of fascinating. Let me line these swatches up here. So the student grade ultramarine is definitely more purple leaning than the other two, but they are all definitely different than each other. We're pretty much at time to paint with these and see what we think of the differences, but I can't paint with partially finished palettes, so we have to finish up these palettes first. So this is the one that the La Petite Aquarelle came in. Beautiful wood box, but I painted it. I messed it all up. I made it better, however you'd like to think of it. So I have some painter's tape on it. Well, I shouldn't have left it on overnight. Actually, that was 2 nights now. But let's see what we ended up with. I did have some overspray, I know, but did the best I could. I had to spray the appliance epoxy on pretty thickly in order for the wood to not just soak it all up. Okay, here it is. Now, appliance epoxy definitely has a bit of an odor to it, and you can notice it a lot when it is wet. However, I brought this palette back in the house when it was completely dry and noticed no odor until I went and pulled all that tape off. And when I was pulling the tape off, that odor kind of came back a little bit, but it's already fading. Keep that in mind. So I have a mixing surface here that I can use. You can see it's still soaked in a bit, but it is shiny and it should work just fine. And then the little mixing surface inset here, I also sprayed with appliance epoxy, so I can put that in there and use it as like an extra lid. I think it helps keep the pans down when this is shut. I don't know, we'll have to see. Plus extra mixing space that I can pull out and use. But I may not need this. If this just becomes an annoyance, then I can leave it out because I have this that hopefully will work. We'll find out. So I still have the beautiful wood on the outside. I got a little bit of overspray here, which I was trying to avoid, but I didn't do a good job. That's just dirt. And a little bit of overspray there, darn it. Luckily, it still looks like a pretty wood box, so I will put my half pans back in there. And when they came, for example, if you put the 8 half pans across here that you're supposed to put, you can see there's still a little extra space. So this movement could be a little annoying. I think while I am doing my little experiment and painting with them, I'll just stick something on the side here so they can't move around. If I was keeping this palette intact as a student grade palette, I would affix these with double-sided tape so they wouldn't move at all, but I'm thinking of incorporating some of these colors into my professional grade palette as I mentioned earlier, so yeah, that adds another element here, so can't affix those to the palette. I have placed these student grade pans back in the palette as they came, and now I have to set up the professional grade palette. Just in case you want to know, for those of you who want to know, this swatch sheet has already been laminated and I didn't want to redo it. Big sigh. So I was going to just place new colors over this, but then this yellow would be here and blah blah blah. So I cut it apart because there's a little bit of a gap between where it sticks to the paper and where it sticks to itself, and I thought, okay, maybe I could peel it apart. But as I suspected, the lamination did glue itself to the paper here. So I can't peel it off the paper. It obviously ruins the whole thing. So we'll be redoing the whole palette. However, that does give me an opportunity to pull out this metal part because that's the separator for holding the brush. And if I just pull it out, then I have room for the yellow over here and any additional colors. It's just riveted in right now. And all you have to do, I'll have to redo that Velcro, but you really just kind of yank it out. And sometimes it takes pliers. It's riveted in. It doesn't want to leave, but you can make it leave and you can make your palette more useful if you're a little bit forceful with it. Maybe we'll try and pull it back the other way. So yep, this one is nicely in there. So I'm going to grab the pliers and I'll pull that out. Got the pliers. And for those of you that cannot see my community tab, I've heard that iPads don't show the community tab. You're gonna get a kick out of this. Let me find it real quick. I found 5 more Van Gogh paints in this little palette here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to need to add those to our Van Gogh palette. That was last week's video. I'll link that in the corner and in the description box below. But the point of that is I like to have all of my one brand together, which is why we are abandoning this Aqua Mini palette. Instead of keeping it all by itself, we're putting all of those colors in there. And you can see the ones that were duplicates, I just kind of placed, actually you can't see that from a top view very well, but I put the little half pans just on top of the paint in the full pan, which is so funny, but it works. It's cute. I like it. And the palette still closes, so whatever. All right, let's grab some pliers and yank that out. Gotta be forceful with it, thanks to the rivets. Sorry about the loud noises, but there you go. Not too hard. So now, if I put this back in, and actually I can rearrange these because that cadmium yellow light was a later addition and it was actually darker than the lemon yellow, so it should have been here instead of here. I already had this swatch sheet with the lemon yellow there, but now I can redo that. My cadmium yellow light can be there, lemon yellow can be there. Actually, this one will have to go kind of between them like that, and I have room for everything in the right order because I am an in the right order kind of girl. So in setting up this professional grade palette, if anyone else is confused, yeah, you're with me. So the ones that are double stacked are the ones that were duplicates in that palette, which I've mentioned. So then I have to add these 5 from the Aqua Mini palette to this one in the professional grade. And then I told you I wanted to add in the student grade ones that I didn't have because they are still light fast. If anyone goes to Kim Crick's website, she's tested all the student grade ones. Well, not all, but the ones she has. And the light fast ratings seem to be mostly accurate. And these 9 colors, I know I said 13 new colors in the beginning, but when we add in this set here, it's only 9 new colors. I do want to add those to my Sennelier palette because they're colors I don't have. Yellow, ochre, orange, important colors. I'm deciding if I want to add this white in or not. I don't know. I use white in my Himimiya palette a lot, which is surprising, so I should probably add it in. Anyway, to do the painting comparison that I want to do with you guys is a little bit tricky because I want to set up this palette and have a swatch sheet that I can reference in order to reference the colors. But I also want to keep in mind that I will probably add in these 9 colors to this palette later, so I need to leave space for them. So it's been kind of a long process here in the brain. I'm sitting here thinking, how am I going to do this? Blah, blah, blah. And you can see that I added the half pans into full pans and just stuck them down with some water, and they are very secure so far. It's only been a couple hours, but still, they're very secure because all of the rest of this palette is full pans, and it would be nice to keep that. And as I use them, having that extra space for the brush would just be a joy. So I have no idea how this is going to end up, but eventually we're going to do a painting here and it's going to be all good. I think I figured out the mystery. There is no mystery really. But in order to figure out how this professional palette is going to be laid out in the end, so I know where all my colors are, so I can do this painting comparison with knowing where my colors are, because that's important, I need to swatch the ones that have not been swatched before. So these up here are all the student grade ones swatched out. I already swatched the Aqua Mini, which you have not seen. I did that separately. Maybe I can release an extra video for you guys on Sunday of some week, but not today. Anyway, you can see I have all those swatches from the Aqua Mini set already done, and those are the professional grade, so I can add those into the lineup. And these ones left in the palette are ones that do not have swatches here. So we're gonna do that. We'll cut them all out, put them all in order, and then I can continue on with my life without being completely confused. These are all the color swatches. Now, the ones I'm showing you right now, you've already seen in the video before this one, if you watch that video. So they are all the student grade ones. But then we switch over here at the yellows to the professional grade ones. And they do definitely seem more pigmented, more vibrant, more bright. And if you see the duplicate color names, because some are the student grade and some are the professional grade. Like the primary yellow, lemon yellow, Payne's gray, those are all duplicates, but we have on the burnt umbers, like look at this specifically, we have burnt umber professional grade versus student grade. And I'll show those to you in more detail up close. In addition to the swatches here in the sketchbook, I thought you might want to see how these compare. This is the lemon yellow in the big swatches, student grade, professional grade. Primary yellow, student grade, professional grade. Burnt sienna, student grade, professional grade. Burnt umber, student grade, professional grade. Ultramarine. Now granted, one of them says ultramarine and one says ultramarine deep. However, they are the same pigment. So there you go. Student grade, professional grade. Green yellow or phthalo green light, depending on student grade or professional grade. Same pigments. Primary blue or phthalo blue, but same pigment. Student grade, professional grade. Payne's gray, student grade, professional grade. It seems like I already did the burnt sienna, but just in case I didn't. Burnt sienna, student grade, professional grade. Really big difference in that one. Although there's a big difference in most of them, but this one is quite significant in my opinion. Okay, so the big advantage to doing swatches like this is that I can lay out how I want my palette. I've tried several different variations, taken photographs of each variation so that in case I like it, I could go back to it after switching it around. But I finally decided on this for the professional palette. However, you probably noticed there are some of the student grade ones in here. So we'll paint without them. You can see here, they are not in here currently, but that's what all these holes are for, is for the 9 student grade ones that would fill out the rest of this palette. For the comparison video, we're keeping them separate, obviously, and then I have Arches 140-pound cotton paper here in pretty much 8x8, and we're gonna do this now. And this painting process lets me tell you about the art challenge I told you about in the beginning of the video. And Dina Tollefson has a YouTube channel here. She's mostly an acrylic painter, but she does other stuff as well. And she puts on these challenges for us on YouTube art community. The challenge this time is "The Sky is the Limit." So you can go search that hashtag. I'll put that right here. And she hosts the playlist over on her channel, so you can click on the playlist and watch everyone's entries. They should all be out by today at some point. So as time goes on or the weekend goes on, you'll probably see more and more added in there. All right, let's get painting already. And starting with the student grade site, I am wetting the entire piece of paper with my big brush from the Lindsay set from Craftimo. This is a very nice brush actually, even if the ferrule is a little bit loose. And you can see how vibrant that yellow is, right? It's not just me, it's vibrant. Now that orange is not high tinting, but it's a very nice color orange. In fact, when I go to try and make an orange with a professional grade set, I have a little bit of problems. I'll tell you about that later, but I like the orange actually being a little bit lighter, but I realized I put the whole painting too high, so I pretty much erased the whole thing and start over. Yeah, good start here, huh? But at least with good paper, you can do that. So I start my yellow lower on the paper this time where I actually need it to be. And the reason for that is I want to put a bunch of dark clouds in the sky, because one of the problems we saw with this student grade set was the problem with the darks not being very strong. And that is true. And while they are looking okay-ish strong here on the paper, they dry really lightly. And I'm just having to dig and mix a whole bunch of colors because the Payne's Gray is not dark enough on its own, and the problems with the darks just kind of go on and on. But that is the only problem I had with the student grade set. The rest of it was a joy to work with. That cobalt blue hue, that really light blue, oh, it is such a pretty color for some just light tints in the sky. It's going to be a nice addition to my palette in the future. So you can see I'm trying to keep making darks in dark places, and it's not the most successful, but it's also not unsuccessful. It's just not going to be that deep dark color that you might want right away, but that's okay. It's not really okay. It's not okay when you're really used to other better paint, better darks, but it is okay if you're expecting it and you know that's part of the problem with this particular set. The rest of the colors are amazing. You can see I'm trying to get a dark there, and that's as dark as I could get it, and it's not bad. It dries lighter, of course, as all watercolor does, but I go back over it again later, and I'm dabbing out some of the center there so I get a nice white glow. But back to what I was saying, these paints were a joy to use. I didn't notice any of that stickiness I was telling you about when I was doing the swatching in the last video. Nothing like that. It was a pleasure. So I'm switching here to the professional grade, trying to do the same-ish painting. So starting with fully wet paper, lovely brush again. And that yellow is also super vibrant, but oh my goodness, I put the cadmium yellow light down and I was like, oh my gosh, that's an explosion of yellow. I think I just said cadmium yellow white. No, I think I said it right. Cadmium yellow light. Anyway, you could see I tried to mix the red and the yellow directly on the paper earlier there to get an orange. That didn't work. The red is just too staining and they don't move together very well, so I did need to mix it in the palette to put an orange on the paper. And the orange I can get with this set is super vibrant without adding in a whole bunch of yellow and water and all of that, so I actually kind of enjoyed the fact that the student grade orange wasn't as high tinting, so that was interesting. Here we are moving on to the darks, and you can see immediately that it was darker faster. Of course, now we're switching down to the water because I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot about the water, but look at the darks there in the water. I needed to get that water in before the paper dried. Oops, but I got it just fine. Luckily, art just stays wet pretty well for a while, at least when you have gone over it several times with your brush to make sure it's fully saturated. Look at the dark. You can see the difference between the left and the right side right now. And granted, this is wet paint. The other side is starting to dry, but still huge difference. So easy to get darks here. I didn't even have to bring in any of the darker colors, like the warm sepia in the professional grade line is really, really dark. Didn't touch it. I used the same colors, or tried to use the same colors as I used in the previous set. Obviously, I had to make my own orange because this set didn't have an orange, but you get the point. And the colors were so vibrant when I put that pink in the sky. I'm like, ooh, that might be too much. So here I'm switching back to the student grade one, trying to make darks darker because I need my tree line to be darker. I need the trees to stand out. And you can see that by glazing the same colors over again, that you can get a nice deep dark color. So there's a possibility of it happening with this set. I just think for us users that are used to more higher grade paint, dealing with these three darks would be really frustrating. The rest of the colors, like I've already mentioned several times, the rest of the colors are just fine. And I don't know if you noticed, but I did pull out my cat's tongue brush from my Lindsay Wyrick set, and it's nice. I like it. It was fun to use. I'm like, hey, this would be the perfect painting for trying that brush out because I'm not doing anything very detailed or specific on this painting, so that was great. And I just wet the water here so my trees could bleed a little bit, and I realized later I needed a couple more reflections and to tone that orange in the lake down a little bit more. I haven't done that yet, but I did notice it, so I'll do that eventually. I have a whole pile of paintings that I want to get back to, and finish up or make some slight alterations too, so that should be fun. So you can see the dark I get here, and the paper on this side stayed wetter longer than the other side. Even though it's the same paper on the same board, I must have just used more water, but I was impatient and put my trees in anyway, and the left side was pretty dry, but the right side was still really wet, I think because the paper warped and the bend was kind of towards that side of the paper and the tape. So those trees on that side bled out a lot, but it kind of makes them look like they're in fog, and I like it. I'm not upset about the little blurriness over there at all. I do miss an obvious reflection in the lake later though, and that is still driving me crazy to this moment because they're sitting here on my desk and I can look to the left here and see that. So yeah, I do need to put these in the pile to readjust here in the future, and hopefully not too far from now, because I'm afraid I'll forget. Actually, you probably won't. You pull a painting out at any time and you'll be able to see how they are and what might need adjusted. So here I thought I was done, but then I'm like, well, I should probably give the clouds a second chance here to see if I can make them darker to kind of match the professional grade side more. So just wet the top of the paper again, and I glazed over the same colors that I made the darks with before, and then added in some of that cobalt violet hue to get some pinks to match the other side. And yeah, they definitely got darker, so a couple of layers, like I've mentioned, will do the trick. You'll get them dark eventually. It just is a little more work than it's worth. All right, time for the tape peel. Da, 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 da. This should be interesting because I put it over the side here. Let's see how, that comes off super easily. That is something I really enjoy about this pinstriping tape, is that it does come off so easily. Some of the best tape I have used, and I will link it below for you because it's awesome. Last one. Ta-da. I do have this over the top of another painting underneath. So let me take that off there. Okay. Well, you guys heard my opinion. What's your opinion? I am so relieved that the student grade paints were fun to paint with. I didn't notice the frustration that I was having while swatching about the brush sticking to the pan when I was painting with them. I think because I had more water in the brush initially anyway. I guess when I'm like going to actually paint, I have a brush full of water. I hope that was informative and that it helped some of you, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye for now. Puppy. Where's Jack?
Yeah.
There he is.
Try not to break the tire off this time.
There's the Jack.
All abusive.